Hey there guys and gals, it's Restocker here coming at you with another Dota video. I hope you guys are all having a fantastic day. Now we'll be continuing on with the gold segment here, and we'll be focusing a little bit more on how to spend gold, and we'll be specifically focusing on position 1, position 3, and position 5. So we won't be talking about position 2 and position 4, but you can sort of equate position 1 and position 2 to be very similar, and position 4 and position 5 to be very similar. And what's really important about this video is I'm going to get you guys to kind of think about the thought process when you're purchasing items. And what's really cool is that you can kind of fill in the thought process for yourself and kind of understand how position 2 and position 4 heroes should be building up their items. So when you're done watching this video, or if you have any questions throughout the video, make sure you kind of jot them down. And once the video is over, leave them in the comments below, and I'll make sure to get to those as soon as possible. So what I'll be doing is I'll be going through a replay between Team EG and Team LGD for you guys, and I'll be focusing on Team LGD and looking at Gyrocopter, Pit Lord, and the Shadow Shaman, who are played as position 1, 3, and 5 respectively, and I'll be talking about the thought process that you should have when you're itemizing for these heroes. So without further ado, let's get into the replay. Hey there guys, and so here we have the replay, and what I'll be doing is focusing a little bit more on the item choices and explaining the thought process of the item choices when you're playing a specific role. So when you're playing a core hero, what you want to do is focus on being very greedy in the way that you build your items. So here we have Gyrocopter. He's opted to go for an Aghanim Scepter, which is particularly greedy. It lets you farm relatively quickly, lets you dish out a decent amount of damage, makes you a little bit durable. And then what you have to, the next thing you see immediately is that he's going for a Black King bars. So he realizes that there's a lot of magical damage and a lot of CCs on the opposing team here. And Ame very intelligently goes for a Black King bar. All these items are very selfish, and that's how you have to play when you're playing a core style. You're not going to be building items like Force Staffs and Pipes typically, because let's say you are playing a core Dragon Knight or maybe even a hero like Timbersaw. Sure, a pipe, even going pipe first on those heroes can potentially be good for your hero, and it does help out your team. But again, it's about being very selfish and getting out that damage. You're not necessarily building pipe thinking about how much it's going to help out your team, although that is kind of like a indirect benefit of going for the item. It's mostly because as Dragon Knight, as Timbersaw, you have so much armor and naturally you become very durable, that going for an item like Pipe is going to make you deal even more damage. You're kind of doing it in a selfish way. Again, when you think about these heroes like Anti-Mage, Terrorblade, Luna, a lot of the items that you purchase are very selfish in nature. You're not going to be picking up these supportive items like Lotus Orbs or Force Staffs. Sure, you might end up picking up like a Hurricane Pike somewhere down the line, but more often than not, you're going to use that Hurricane Pike to save yourself. So that's kind of the thing that you have to realize, that when you're playing these core heroes, you have to first build up these small items like Treads, Ring of Aquila, and then once you have a good foundation to farm, you can start going for these greedy items that are going to be very selfish in nature. Again, if we look at Arteezy very quickly, we can note that he has a Ring of Aquila, Mask of Madness, Power Treads, Dragonlance. These items don't do anything to help his team. He's just being very aggressive, and he's able to farm up very quickly, and he's able to accelerate playing very selfishly. Now let's move on to Underlord very quickly. And again, here we can see that he's gone for that Pipe, the item that we're talking about a little bit earlier, which offers his team a little bit more utility. Now here Underlord is played as a position 3. So what this means is he's gone for Arcane Boots, Pipe, and he recognizes that as long as he's able to help his cores, the OD and the Gyrocopter, the 2 primary cores, he's going to be able to do a lot of work throughout the team fight, just letting them survive, being durable, frontlining for his team, and ensuring that his cores are able to just dish out so much damage. So again, when you're playing these position 3 heroes, sometimes you'll play something like a Nyx Assassin, Underlord, Omni Knight. It might be a good idea to go for a few items that will help you just sustain. So again, in this case, we have the Mana Boots, which lets him throw out a lot of spells. And then we have Pipe of Insight. If you're playing a hero like Omni Knight, maybe you go for Soul Ring into Drums to help out your team. Again, if you're playing Nyx Assassin, you might go for one item that helps you out. So for example, you'll start off with a Blink Dagger, but then you'll transition back into something like a Yule Scepter or a Force Staff. Again, something that you can utilize a little bit more in a team-oriented way. So unlike the core heroes, position 3 heroes, you have to itemize for utility and helping your team out. That's the primary focus of position 3 heroes. And again, this might deviate a little bit depending on who your cores are. For example, we do see Omni Knights going for that Radiant Sanj and Yasha build where you're just up in your opponent's face. And that works a little bit better if your core heroes aren't as damage oriented. So if you have something like a mid Dragon Knight who's struggling, maybe you have a Timbersaw who isn't as right click damage focused, then you can go for those little bit more aggressive items. But for the most part, in the majority of your games, when you're playing these position 3 heroes, you should pick up a couple items that help you sustain in the lane, again, like a magic wand, arcane boots, soul ring, what have you. And then you'll pick up these items that are a little bit more team oriented, like the pipes, like the force staffs, and the Yules that kind of set up for kills and things like that. So that's what you want to focus on when you're position 3 hero. Now for position 5 heroes, let's focus on Shadow Shaman very quickly. We can see that he's gone for an Ether Lens, and Ether Lens allows Shadow Shaman to get his spells off. And the thing with Shadow Shaman is, naturally, he has a lot of things in his kit, for example, the shackles and the hex, that allow him to be a team player. So he doesn't necessarily have to focus too much on prioritizing for helping out his team. You know, he doesn't have to go for like a Lotus Orb and items that, like for example, like an Urn or something, because his kit innately gives him a lot of utility that helps out his team. So for Shadow Shaman specifically, he wants to go for Ether Lens, Blink, and probably a Force Staff afterwards. And these things, just thanks to how his kit works, very similar to Lion, he's going to be able to help out his team that way. So if you're playing a position 5 hero, maybe that doesn't have so much crowd control innately, you might be building up for items like Glimmer Cape, Force Staff, Lotus Orbs. You might be picking up those items more quickly as a support hero if you don't have that utility factor. So it really depends on the playstyle. Now let's jump a little bit further into the replay here one last time, and we can kind of see how all of this stuff culminates for LGD. So we can see here, again, looking at Gyrocopter, the core hero, he's opted to go for very aggressive items. He's finished up that BKB, has Sanj and Yasha. Like, all of his things are very damage oriented, making himself very beefy, ensuring that he's able to do the damage. And he's very selfish in his build. So when you're playing these core heroes, just focus on doing a lot of damage. Don't necessarily worry about what your team needs, because your position 3 hero is the one that should be doing that. Now let's zoom out a little bit here so we can see how the fight breaks out. Again, you can see Shadow Shaman's able to cast his spells from extremely far thanks to that Ether Lens. He has utilized both his Blink and his Force Staff to get into position. And again, look at Underlord. Look how beefy he's making his entire team. They've got a pipe running, they have a Crimson Guard, and he's got a Guardian's Greaves on top of that. They're so durable in these fights, and as long as they're able to withstand that initial onslaught from EG and all that magical damage, they should be able to have a pretty decent time of it in this fight. So they track up the Dark Willow in this case. We have the Obsidian Destroyer, again, who has a lot of mobility innately. Blink Dagger and Hurricane Pike make the OD very mobile. At the same time, he can get into position to dish out that damage if it's ever required from his team. And then he's going back towards a sheep stick. And then again, let's look at the roster. So again, let's look at the 3 heroes and kind of talk about how that fight went out. So they had Gyrocopter, extremely durable with BKB, Satanic, and a lot of damage. So he's well-rounded in dishing out damage and making sure he's able to sustain himself. So that's very important as a core. Being able to sustain yourself in a team fight and putting out that damage. Again, if we go to Underlord as a position 3, you can see he has a pipe, a Crimson, and a Guardian Greaves. It was so difficult for EG to dish out any damage to their heroes just because of how much defensive items that the Underlord has gone for. Again, he doesn't have to focus on damage because he has OD and he has the Gyrocopter, and these heroes innately do a lot of damage. So he's just making sure that he's able to allow his cores to function as best as possible. Then we have Shadow Shaman. He has Blink Dagger, Force Staff, and Ether Lens, and all 3 of these items, again, are very geared towards Rasta's toolkit. It allows Shadow Shaman to get those shackles off. He can get Hex. He can try to use Mass Serpent Words and trap an opponent from very far. He has a lot of initiating tools, and at the same time, he can Force Staff allies to save them if he ever has to do so. So again, you can see how the thought process for each of these roles is very different, and you guys have to incorporate that when you're playing your games. Because the reason I really want to make this video is because I think core players do a pretty decent job of understanding how they should be playing up their matches, and in terms of item choices, at least they understand within a match I have to go for these specific items to make sure that I'm able to do a lot of damage. The main issue comes from supports and the position 3s. For example, I see position 3s going for too damage oriented in some cases. For example, they'll pick up something like a Shadow Blade where maybe going for something like a drums would be a little bit more efficient for the rest of the team. Maybe going for a defensive item like a hood and then transitioning to a pipe is much more useful than going for like a blink dagger. Sometimes jewels is a little bit better than blink dagger. It's very important that you understand the thought process when you're purchasing up these items. And then of course, position 5 heroes, I think sometimes they get a little too far-sighted in how they approach their item choices. So for example, a Rasta player might rush an Aghanim Scepter instead of working towards these small items that are extremely useful for his team. You can see just how much work that the Rasta does. And in the end, despite the match being a 23-23, LGD has a very decisive victory here at the end, just because of how all their items culminate together. Gyrocopter is very tanky, Odie is very tanky. A lot of that is thanks to the Underlord going for those Guardian Greaves, Crimson Guard, and the pipe. And then they have Shadow Shaman always sitting in the back lines, making sure he's able to disable the right targets. So that's it for this video, guys. Really about the item choices. Really think about why you're going for something. Again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, make sure you leave them in the section below, and I will get to those as soon as possible. And as always, thank you so much for watching.